Ladies and gentlemen, we are just a few days away from the release of The Penguin, the spin-off series to Matt Reeves' The Batman. So naturally, this is causing some people on social media to start nitpicking and trying to take shots at Matt Reeves and his vision of these characters. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
We are 2 years removed from Matt Reeves' interpretation of the Batman. And I'll be the first one to admit that while I loved a lot about the film, I did have issues with it. Mainly with the third act. But that hasn't stopped a possible continuation of that world from being one of the only things I am remotely excited about when it comes to comic book movies. Now, for those of you who have been following along, it seems like Matt Reeves' The Batman 2 has been delayed a handful of times. And depending on what you read and what you believe, that could be because of Matt Reeves himself, or some people seem to think that WB and DC are dragging their feet with the project because they want their James Gunn reboot to be released first. And honestly, I could see either scenario being true. Let's face it, WB has a history of meddling in the creative process. And as far as Matt Reeves goes, he does seem like the type of creative who would take his time with the project and make sure that he gets it right. Something that other creatives who are involved with comic book movies could learn from. I've seen a lot of people complain that the Batman 2 is taking too long to develop. But I think that has more to do with certain members of the audience being impatient and looking for instant gratification than it does with Matt Reeves' creative process.
That makes sense.
The point I'm trying to make with all of this is that from the very start, ever since Matt Reeves announced that Robert Pattinson was cast as Batman, there have been people trying to discredit his vision or take down this movie in some way. And now fast forward to a few years later, and the hate campaign seems to be continuing, and this time it's for an even dumber reason. With The Penguin releasing very soon, there have been some people on social media taking issue with Matt Reeves' interpretation of that character once again. If you don't have some people who have clearly never read a comic book asking why the character isn't half bird, you have the other side who are once again complaining about the realistic take Matt Reeves had on these characters. So what we have here is someone pulled up a quote from producer Dylan Clark, who said that Matt Reeves and company felt like the name Oswald Cobblepot was a bit too unrealistic for this world. And this is why they changed his name to Oscobb instead. And apparently this was a deal breaker for a lot of people, and I will never understand this line of thinking. What really boggles my mind about this is that there are other production companies out there who are absolutely massacring the source material on a day-to-day basis, and yet they still get praised for it.
I don't get it.
But yet if Matt Reeves slightly alters the Penguin's real name, that's where these people draw the line. I've actually seen people suggest that Matt Reeves is ashamed of making superhero movies, I guess because he doesn't embrace the silliness like everyone else does. I've said this many times before, and I'll say it again here. I'm absolutely fine with any creative taking some liberties if it means keeping things consistent with their unique vision, as long as the general essence of the character is still intact. And I believe that is exactly what Matt Reeves did with his version of the Penguin. And to me, that character was actually one of the best parts of the movie. There's a reason that this character is getting a spin-off, outside of course, there is more story to tell, but also because WB clearly realized that he was a standout.
Holy God, what are you showing me? His head? Come on!
I can't for the life of me figure out why some fans seem to be so dead set against realism or a fresh interpretation. We literally got the best comic book movie trilogy of all time when a director took that exact approach. Joker was nominated for an Oscar because it took that same exact approach. The Batman was more well received than anything coming out of DC at that time because it took that approach. Now, I'm not saying that every character or every story needs to take that approach, but clearly it works for Batman, Batman-related characters, and the world that he exists in. Clearly, talented filmmakers like Christopher Nolan, Todd Phillips, and yes, even Matt Reeves find those types of stories more interesting to tell. So why not let them cook? Why are so many people so quick to want nothing more than another MCU carbon copy? I just don't understand.
Don't waste my motherfucking time!
The crazy thing is that you can clearly have both, but people tend to rally against the more serious for some reason. Which brings me to my next point, because there was a story floating around on the internet over the past couple of days about how Matt Reeves chose to not direct episodes of The Penguin and instead chose to focus on developing the Batman 2. And I retweeted this story saying Matt Reeves would have made a much better head of DC Studios, and you would think I just told everyone that the Earth was flat. Most of the responses came down to people trying to dismiss my opinion and telling me that they have no interest in seeing grounded or realistic versions of other DC characters. And I can kindly respond to all of them, even though I didn't, by saying neither do I. When I advocate for someone like Matt Reeves to run DC Studios, that doesn't mean that every project under him would have to have the same tone as his Batman movie.
You serious?
Being a director himself, I know that Matt Reeves would have a clear understanding of the importance of creative freedom. Which means in a perfect world, DC would have no shared universe moving forward. As the boss, Matt Reeves would hire talented people to write individual standalone stories for iconic characters, and maybe help develop them somewhat along the way. But in the end, he would leave the creative process up to the people that he hires based on their pitch. You know, kind of like the only movies that DC has had any level of success with recently. I'm sorry, but it feels like the result of MCU brain rot to think that everything being created under a studio banner needs to fit together. That is a boring way to tell stories, in my opinion, and that is exactly how we end up in the position we find ourselves in now, with this formulaic way of making films that is now plaguing this genre.
Man, I'm tired of being right.
I strongly believe that if Matt Reeves was in charge, he would have encouraged fresh ideas, and not just tried to replicate what Marvel is doing. And yes, before anyone says it, I know he already turned the job down. But if we're being honest with ourselves, it's probably because WB and DC wanted him to be someone that he is not. Regardless of what some people try to say, Matt Reeves is not a lazy creative mind. The guy almost single-handedly resurrected the Planet of the Apes franchise in a way that no one could have predicted. But sure, he couldn't run a whole creative division of a studio. Give me a break. Regardless of all of this, the fact that people are already upset with the Penguin series before it's even released tells me that it's something that I should be more excited to see. Because to me, if you aren't challenging the status quo, if you aren't taking some chances, then what exactly is the point of creating anything in the first place?
Y'all be cool. Right on.